Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here. Don't forget to subscribe. It's Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week as always. And my question this week is, what do Dell, Nascar, Louis Vuitton, AT&T, Christian Dior, a dating app disaster in the UK government have in common? They don't want to be talked about on this show. And with that, let's dive in. And before we dive in, as always, I want to thank the people that sent me these tips. And please send me tips as well if you can. And that would be Harry Stanton, Gail Whitaker, Sandra Slidnerink, and Jacqueline Wolf. Thank you so much. And with that, let's dive into the Philadelphia Indemnity Insurance Company. Now, attackers breached the company in June, stole customer data, and that is according to a filing with California's Attorney General. Apparently, this happened between June 9th and 10th, and essentially they had called this an outage previously, but they said there was no ransomware and no encryption. They did not report the incident to law enforcement and retain outside forensic experts, and here we are. But now we know names, driver's license numbers, dates of birth, and more are basically up for grabs here thanks to the Philadelphia Indemnity Insurance Company. So hopefully you don't use them for all your indemnity or insurance needs. Moving on. Let's talk about MNZ, or Mobile Notary Zone. They're not providing much detail about their data breach, but basically they have a client, North American Funding, that conducted an internal review and identified that their information was caught up in this third-party company, Mobile Notary Zone. So on June 6th of this year, 2025, we learned about suspicious activity associated with information provided to one of our vendors that provided notary services. So here we are. We are talking address, social security number, date of birth, financial account information, and other personal financial information, not to mention names, obviously, although they didn't say that in their quote, but here we are. So heads up, if you use New American Funding, who uses Mobile Notary Zone, and odds are this is not going to be the first Mobile Notary Zone that we are going to see, and I'll keep you up to date here on them. Moving on. Dayton-based Premier Health. So we're heading to Ohio. Now, Premier Health explained they became aware of suspicious activity around July of 2023. 2 years ago, people, 2 years ago. Now, they found that basically they had systems access between June 7th through July 12th of 2023. So more than 2 years ago, just by a little bit. And so we're talking names, dates of birth, social security, driver's license, taxpayer IDs, digital signatures, login credentials, financial account information, medical info, and health insurance information as well. So if you're using Premier Health in the city of Dayton, Ohio, you might want to check in. Moving on, let's talk about Dell, aka Dell Computers. Now, essentially, a data extortion group known as WorldLeaks has just leaked 1.3 terabytes of data stolen from Dell Technologies. Now, Dell confirmed a breach earlier, saying that it impacted their Customer Solution Center platform. That's an environment designed to basically showcase product demos. And according to Dell's statement to the media, the lost data was quote-unquote primarily synthetic, end quote, although they noted their investigation was ongoing. Basically, what Dell here is saying is that they really didn't have data hit, that it really didn't come out of their systems if it's synthetic. So we're going to see what happens with this, but I'm going to keep an eye on it because Dell's pretty flippin' huge. That said, Michael Dell, not a good public speaker. You think he would be, given all his money, but here it is. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but I've seen him speak, and my God, a funeral could break out. No offense, Michael Dell, if you're watching this, and you probably aren't. So with that, let's move on. Episource. They're a medical billing organization. So they notified individuals that their personal health data was basically stolen in a cyber attack. They reported to Health and Human Services, Office of Civil Rights, saying 5.4 million individuals essentially were impacted. This happened around February 6th of this year, and somebody was able to access and copy patient and member data out of the system. So we're talking doctor data, medical records, diagnosis and test results, medication, imaging, care details, and other treatment, health insurance information as well, and on and on and on. So if you're using Episource, or rather your healthcare provider is using Episource, and I do believe they're a big one, you might want to check in, and I'm going to be keeping an eye on that one as well. Moving on. Let's talk about Louis Vuitton again. If you are a longtime listener or follower of mine, you've probably heard me say Louis Vuitton in the last couple of months or so. Well, their parent got hit, and which means what we are seeing, interestingly enough, is as data protection authorities or compliance laws around the entire globe where Louis Vuitton has presence essentially are starting to kick in, we're starting to see these versions of Louis Vuitton US, Louis Vuitton Germany, like whatever it is. This week, it's Hong Kong. So if you're in Hong Kong and you are a big fan of Louis Vuitton, they are basically saying 419,000 Hong Kongers, Hong Kongese, I don't know what you call yourselves. Either way, you're caught up in this. And so obviously that's a huge issue as well. We're talking names, addresses, email addresses, as well as phone numbers, shopping history, and product preferences. So that actually is very concerning. And the reason being is Louis Vuitton ain't cheap. And so if you're spending $1 bazillion with like a Louis Vuitton and your address gets leaked along with the products that you've got, well, burglars can go on a shopping spree too, right? So heads up to you if you're in Hong Kong and you shop at Louis Vuitton. But to be perfectly fair, I don't care where you are on the planet. If you shopped at Louis Vuitton, heads up to you. And I have a feeling I'll be talking about Louis Vuitton again next week. Moving on. Mackenzie Memorial Hospital in the great state of Michigan. So they reported an incident affecting more than 54,000 patients. This incident was detected around April 15th of this year. Names, social security numbers, and financial account information were caught up. So heads up, Mackenzie Memorial Hospital in Michigan. Moving on, let's head on over to the great state of Montana and talk about Western Montana Mental Health Center. They're notifying 87,000 individuals, which is surprising there's that many people in Western Montana, but okay, here we go. They had a September 2024 cyber attack. And for the record, Montana is a beautiful, beautiful state. Like, really, it is. But there's just not many people there. Anyway, this security incident on July 17th of this year involves unauthorized access to the protected health information of up to 86,758. So that's really interesting because apparently they're declaring this on July 17th, 2025. And basically, but this happened on September of 2024. I am taking this for the record from local news sourcing. It takes me hours to put these things together. But Western Montana Mental Health Center is saying names, social security numbers, driver's license numbers, dates of birth, state and federal IDs, medical information, financial account information, and or health insurance information is caught up in that. So heads up to you if you're a patient there. Moving on. Old Town Medical and Dental Center. I'm not sure where that is. I'm guessing it's in Old Town. Anyway, they recently announced a cyber attack that involved unauthorized access of protected health information for 2,567 individuals. A ransom note was received around May 15th demanding payment. And so if you use Old Town Medical and Dental Center for your medical and dental needs, you better check in. And with that, let's move to our mini segment simply entitled, If You Just Spent Money on Cybersecurity, You Wouldn't Be Getting Sued, You Wouldn't Be Losing Your Reputation, and I sure as heck wouldn't be talking about you right now. And with that, let's head on down to the great state of Louisiana and Lake Charles Memorial Health. Now, a $2 million settlement has been received, basically approval from a court to resolve the class action against the Southwest Louisiana Hospital Association, which does business as Lake Charles Memorial Health in, obviously, Lake Charles, Louisiana. This stemmed from a 2022 data breach affecting 269,752 patients, and everybody was notified on December 23rd, or basically you will be notified. No, I'm sorry. The note is actually wrong. This is a direct copy and paste. You have until December 23rd of 2025 to claim if you have anything to do with Lake Charles Memorial Health. Sorry about that. Moving on, MedStar Health. They agreed to a class action litigation stemming from a 2023 data breach that impacted more than 183,000 individuals. MedStar Health will create a $1.35 million settlement fund to cover attorneys' fees, legal cost expenses, and claims from class members for reimbursement. Basically, the individuals in this class were notified on or about May 4th, and you have until October 14th of this year to go get paid from MedStar Health. Moving on, I want to give you an update on AT&T, one of the larger telecom providers here in the United States, not to mention cellular. On Friday, June 30th, U.S. District Judge Ada Brown granted preliminary approval to the terms of a proposed settlement from AT&T that will resolve two lawsuits related to data breaches. The current settlement could see AT&T paying $177 million to customers adversely affected by at least one of these two breaches, and essentially they expect the claims processing will begin on or about August 4th of this year. So if you're in one of these classes, $177 million sounds great. The lawyers get 150, you get about 20 bucks. That's my guess. Moving on, let's go to the great state of Maine. Central Maine Healthcare. 6 class action lawsuits have been filed against Central Maine Healthcare, and the lawsuits claim patient data were exposed and alleged negligence were here. I don't have much more information at this point. A lot of the legal stuff is behind paywalls, but I try to get through them as best I can. But heads up if you're a patient or possibly an employee at Central Maine Healthcare. And so those were your lawsuits and payouts of the week, and if any of them had just spent money on cybersecurity, they wouldn't be getting sued, they wouldn't be losing their reputation, and I sure as heck wouldn't be talking about them now. Moving on, let's get back into real time here and head on down to the great state of Kentucky. Cumberland County Hospital Association on June 2nd, they notified Health and Human Services Office of Civil Rights that they had 36,659 people caught up in their breach. Cumberland County Hospital detected this incident on April 3rd of this year, and basically according to its notice, an unauthorized party gained access between February 21st and April 3rd of this year as well. All the normal players here in terms of data: names, dates of birth, address, phone numbers, email, race, ethnicity, along with social security numbers, medications, diagnosis, treatments, dates of service, medical records, health plan numbers, claims and billing information. Basically, if you have jaywalked in front of Cumberland County Hospital, it is probably caught up in this breach. So best of luck to you, Kentuckians. Moving on, let's talk about NASCAR, the super popular racing organization here in the United States. They are warning customers this week of a data breach basically caused by a cyber attack back in March. This incident exposed social security numbers of an unknown number of victims. I'm assuming NASCAR fans are not going to get caught up in that. That's got to be employee information. And in filings with regulators in Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, the company declined to say how many people were caught up in this. NASCAR also says its IT teams identified the cyber attack on April 3rd and began an investigation. Notification letters started coming out on July 24th. So if you're a big NASCAR fan, or maybe using their website or definitely employed by them, keep an eye out for NASCAR letters in the mail. Moving on, let's talk about the House of Dior, or Dior, high fashion like Louis Vuitton. They're sending breach notifications to U.S. customers, informing them of a May cybersecurity incident. And here's the fun part, because Dior is a French luxury fashion house, and they're part of the LVMH, that's Moet Hennessy Louis Vuitton group, which basically is the largest luxury conglomerate on the entire planet. What this means is Moet Hennessy, Louis Vuitton, LVMH, basically, and their subsidiaries of those brands, etc., we're going to see a lot of disclosures, and so this could be a large rolling contender for Breach of the Year for 2025. Here we are. So, full names, contact details, physical address, date of birth, passport or government IDs, and social security numbers, in some cases, employees, are caught up. So if you're shopping at Dior or Louis Vuitton or Moet Hennessy or anything else that they own, you might want to check in. Moving on, Allianz Life, or Allianz Life. This is like I know these guys from travel insurance. So like if I go get a ticket on like an American Airlines or United or whatever, Allianz is always the one that insures it. Well, they apparently have a life insurance division as well, because attackers may have stolen personal information from the majority of the insurance firms, 1.4 million customers just in North America. So think Mexico, US, Canada. Anyway, the German parent company to Allianz basically added that the attackers were, quote, able to obtain personally identifiable information related to a majority of Allianz Life customers, financial professionals, and select Allianz Life employees using a social engineering technique, end quote. I do not know how many were impacted by this. I do not know if my plane ticket insurance, because I travel a lot, is impacted by this. I don't have life insurance through them, but either way, not a good look. Moving on, I want to give you an update on Oracle. Here's another contender for Breach of the Year, as we have more and more companies coming out on a breach that Oracle initially said didn't exist, and then backpedaled and said, yeah, it did. And this week, it's Mosaic Life Care. Now, they had 145,269 people impacted by using Oracle hosting that was susceptible to a vulnerability and therefore a cyber attack. So heads up, Mosaic Life customers. Moving on. Prestige Maintenance USA. They're based out of the great state of Texas. They are a commercial cleaning and facilities maintenance company, and they experienced a data breach impacting 65,402 individuals. The incident was first detected on January 17th when the company identified unusual activity in its cyber environment. Now, a report to Texas Attorney General's office indicates that names, social security numbers, driver's license numbers, and more were exposed. They began mailing notifications on July 22nd. So heads up, Texans, if you use Prestige Maintenance USA. Moving on, the Alcohol and Drug Testing Service, or TADTS, they are notifying roughly 750,000 people that their personal information was compromised in a July 9th attack. We're talking names, dates of birth, social security, driver's license numbers, other IDs, financial and credit card information, health insurance information details, biometric information, that's fun, login credentials, emails and passwords, and USCIS or alien registration numbers. So heads up, if you've been tested for drugs or alcohol from the Alcohol and Drug Testing Service, here we go. I don't know, for the record, how the attackers got in. Moving on, Texas Digestive Health Specialists. An unauthorized party accessed patient information in late May, according to the clinic's website. The information of 41,521 patients may have been exposed, and I do not know if that's past or current, and I do not know patients. I do not know what PII or PHI was caught up in this. But heads up, again, if you're in Texas and you got digestive issues and you use Texas Digestive Specialists. Moving on, co-op. They're just called co-op. So here we are. I think we all know what a co-op is, and they're called co-op, but all 6.5 million members of the co-op had their personal data compromised in a cyber attack carried on April 30th. This is according to their CEO. Now, initial statements from the co-op describe the incident as having only a quote-unquote small impact on internal systems, including call centers and back office operations. Alleged attackers soon contacted media outlets and claimed to have accessed both employee and customer data, which then prompted the company to update its assessment. So heads up to you, if you're a member of the co-op, literally that's what they call themselves, and that's an interesting one. Better check in. Moving on, I want to give you an update on Covenant Health because we have more basically hospitals and medical centers declaring data breaches. And the last one, or the latest one I should say, is the St. Joseph Hospital in the great state of New Hampshire, and more than 2,000 people were impacted by that. So heads up to you if you have anything to do with Covenant Health or St. Joseph Hospital in New Hampshire. Moving on, Radiologists Associates of Richmond, that would be Virginia. Anyway, they revealed a major data breach impacting 1.4 million people. This was traced back to unauthorized access on April 2, between April 2nd and April 6th of last year, so over a year. Good job, guys. Exposing both personal and medical information stored in their system. So heads up, Radiology Associates of Richmond, patients and employees. Moving on, PDI Health on May 14th. PDI discovered a security breach in their internal systems. The unauthorized party accessed data, compromising patient records. And so we're talking names, social security, dates of birth, billing information, electronic medical records or EMRs, test results, and medical history. Not fun. Movient is the next one. They became aware of a security incident in their internal employee email system, and they determined unauthorized third party gained access between February 27th through March 6th of this year, and this could contain information on individuals, including names and social security numbers. So if you have anything to do with Moviynt, that's Movynt, you might want to check in. Moving on. Next Level Finance Partners doing business as Century Support Services. Around November 7th of last year, Century became aware of a security incident in their systems, and upon detection, basically they went to work, launched third parties, all that fun stuff. And what we're talking about here that was determined to be hit was names, dates of birth, social security numbers, driver's license and or state IDs, medical information, health insurance information, passport numbers, financial account information, and digital signatures as well. That's fun. And so heads up, Century Support Services, aka Next Level Finance Partners, customers. And with that, let's move to our finalies. And we've got a couple finalies for you this week. I couldn't decide because I think both of these are just beyond important, but we're going to head across the pond to the United Kingdom on this one and talk about specifically the UK government, because Parliament's intelligence watchdog has announced that it will launch an inquiry into a major data breach which compromised the identities of thousands of Afghans and British military officials. Now, you might have seen this in the news because this was very damaging to the image and optics of the British military. Now, this data leak basically prompted a super injunction, which meant that the Intelligence and Security Committee, or ISC, which routinely reviews sensitive material, was not briefed until last week. A Ministry of Defense, or MOD, spokesperson said that the government strongly welcomed the committee's scrutiny on the data leak. The ISC, for the record, oversees the work of MI5, MI6, and the Government Communications Headquarters, or GCHQ, out of London. Now, in a statement this past Monday, Lord Beamish, who is overseeing this whole shebang-a-bang, said that the cross-party group would, quote, conduct an inquiry into the intelligence community role and activity in connection with the loss of data, end quote, after considering defense assessments related to the case. So, with that, that's the primer, or primer, as they say across the pond. Let's talk about the breach itself. Now, this leak was made in February of 2022 by someone working at the UK Special Forces headquarters in London who inadvertently emailed a spreadsheet containing more than 30,000 resettlement applications to an individual outside of the government, thinking that he was just sending data on 150 individuals. That data breach was only identified in August of 2023 when a man in Afghanistan made a Facebook post identifying 9 individuals and indicated he could release the rest in a sequence of events that the government sources were basically saying was blackmail. So the MOD applied basically for a gag order in September of 2023, or gagging order, as they say across the pond, due to the risk of reprisals from the Taliban against the nearly 19,000 Afghans who were revealed to have worked with British forces basically in that country. And again, we are talking about now a Taliban rule in Afghanistan when the U.S. military pulled out. I believe it was the first year of President Biden. I don't think it was the second year. I think it was the first year of President Biden's term. Essentially, the Taliban swept in something like a week and took the country over. This is actually a really big issue, and I'll talk about that in a second. Now let's go back to this, because the High Court basically in the UK put a highly restrictive super injunction in place, meaning even the existence of the gag order could not be reported until a judge lifted the order last week. The discovery of this data breach forced the government then to covertly set up basically the Afghanistan Response Route, or ARR, to bring some 7,000 of those impacted to the UK at a projected final cost of about £850 million, which I believe is around $1 billion US. So this is an issue because more information has also come out about potential war crimes and all of this other stuff. But this is, I think, a very serious issue. And the UK has this issue, but so does the United States, in the sense that there were a lot of Afghans that worked with basically the allied forces, United Kingdom, USA, and anybody else, that was joining us in the coalition of the willing, essentially under George W. Bush is what we're talking about, So this is a big issue because these people then would be targeted by the Taliban if the Taliban ever took power, which they did a few years back. In fact, my 4th TED Talk was on this exact issue, not the UK, but basically the failed privacy lessons of Afghanistan, where the United States military, in its haste to leave, left a whole bunch of biometric identification systems that had this kind of information on there. The Taliban basically had a roadmap, thanks to this leak in the UK, not to mention the biomedical devices that the biometrics and biomedical devices the US military left. They could build a roadmap into those that were working against the Taliban. And these Afghans were basically promised the hope of leaving Afghanistan at some point with their families as a thank you for their service over the years. Remember, there was 20 plus years of democratic rule propped up by the US military, and not to mention the UK as well. They were involved also. So this is a huge thing any way you cut it. And so I'm glad to see that the United Kingdom is basically moving these people, at least those that they can find, out of that region. I hope they get out there with their families safely. But this is a big problem. And quite frankly, it's one we've had for years under Biden, now under obviously a new administration, all these kinds of things. It should be addressed, at some point, and it should have been addressed, quite frankly, before the United States pulled out. But I also understand why we pulled out. It's a whole thing. I'm not adjudicating the politics of that. So, best of luck to you, United Kingdom, but more importantly, best of luck to you, Afghans, that help that cause. Moving on, our other finally for today is an app known as Tea. That's TEA, like I'm going to have a spot of tea if I were in England, for example. So Tea, if you don't know this, it's kind of a provocative dating app, and it's designed to let women, specifically women, anonymously ask or warn each other about men they've encountered. This has absolutely blown up. Basically, in the past week in the United States' Apple App Store, it became the top spot under dating. So on this past Friday, the company behind the app basically confirmed that it had been hacked. Thousands of images, including selfies, basically were leaked online. Quote, "We have engaged third-party cybersecurity experts and are working around the clock to secure our systems," end quote. That is according to essentially T and their parent company. So 404 Media, which earlier reported on this breach, said that it was 4chan users, so basically just, single angry men who discovered and basically an exposed database that allowed anyone to access this material from T. The app and the breach highlight basically this nature of seeking romance in the age of social media. So here's what to know about this, because I actually think this is a potentially very dangerous situation here. So T was meant to help women safely date. That's according to the T's founder, Sean Cook. He's a software engineer who previously worked at Salesforce and Shutterfly. And basically, he said that he founded this website in 2022, or the app specifically, after witnessing his own mother's terrifying experiences online. So Cook said that they included unknowingly dating men with criminal records or being catfished, deceived by men using false identities, all this kind of stuff. So if you're a woman and let's say you've been duped or you've had a very negative experience or potentially, God forbid, a violent experience with somebody, T basically would be a safe place for you to go and alert other women to say, hey, like Bob 2 towns over, you don't want to date Bob. So T markets itself as a safe way for women to anonymously vet men, like I just said. So they might, these men could be coming from Tinder, Bumble, wherever it is. And basically, they're trying to ensure that men are who they say they are. They're not criminals or already married in a relationship, et cetera, et cetera. So, we just went through a Coldplay concert, so people cheat, right? Quote, "It's like people have their own little Yelp pages." This is according to Aaron Mink, whose Cleveland firm Mink Law specializes in cases involving online defamation and harassment. And in an Apple Store review, one woman wrote that she used T-Search to investigate a man she began talking to and discovered, quote, over 20 red flags, including serious allegations like assault and recording women without their consent, end quote. She said she cut off that communication with that individual, quote, "I can't imagine how things could have gone had I not known," end quote. And that's, a real serious issue that we've got. And I'm not going to talk into the manosphere and like all of these different kinds of things. I make a joke about 4chan being single, angry men, because overwhelmingly it is. We have a very serious problem with basically a lack of socialization in the younger generation. So this is obviously a huge, huge issue. Now, a surge in social media attention over the past week did push T to number one. And that's, why we're talking about this outside of this breach being just very seriously. So in the 7 days from July 17th through the 23rd, T download shot up 525%, and they said on Instagram they reached 4 million users. But there is a flip side to this as well. So a female columnist for the Times of London, who signed into the app this past Thursday, called T a, quote, "man-shaming site," end quote, and complained that, and I quote again, "this is simply vigilante justice entirely reliant on the scruples of anonymous women. With T on the scene, what man would ever dare date a woman again, end quote. And yeah, that is the flip side of this. You have a certain amount of trust when you are reading reviews from somebody that they're going to be honest, as opposed to, oh, I had a bad date, I think the guy's a jerk, and now I'm going to totally shame him, in a negative way that just, goes overboard because I don't know anything about the guy on a site like this. That is the flip side. It goes both ways here, right? So that attorney Mink said, and I quote, "Over the last couple of weeks, we've gotten hundreds of calls on it. It's blown up. People are upset. They're getting named. They're getting shamed," end quote. So let's basically discuss this breach in numbers as well. T reported that about 72,000 images were leaked online, including 13,000 images of selfies or photo IDs that users submitted during account verification. In other words, basically all of these women that went online to let's say, rate or judge or warn other women about this are now being exposed. Another 59,000 images that were publicly viewable in app from posts, comments, and direct messages were also accessed, basically according to the company's statement. No email addresses or phone numbers were exposed, according to the company, who said the breach only affects users who signed up before February of 2024. Quote, "At this time, there is no evidence to suggest that additional user data was affected. Protecting users' privacy and data is our highest priority," end quote. It also said the users do not need to change their passwords or delete their accounts. Quote unquote, all data has been secured. But there's been a cottage industry that I have seen as I was researching this, basically going through and finding that people were getting the metadata out of the pictures and being able to put GPS locations to basically, let's say, a woman, for example, that had complained or wrote a post or did whatever, however T works. I've never been in the app, on, let's say, Bob from 2 towns over that she didn't like. Whether that's legit, illegitimate, I'm not talking about that. But now what we have potentially is somebody that could potentially be a violent criminal or that has been reported on. And now he can go to one of these cottage sites on Google Maps and actually pinpoint essentially the face and the link, so, oh, look at my town, look at the women that are on T. Oh, I dated her and I'm exposing this. It must be her. And now we have basically GPS locations out there. This is a very serious issue. And quite frankly, it really underscores that, you might be a startup, you might be moving fast and breaking things, but we have to bake in good security over and over and over. And if we're not, we're potentially getting people killed or just putting them in harm's way, which is this potential here. And I don't think T, from everything I've read, is really acknowledging that just yet, beyond, oh, it's old logins, it's secure, et cetera, et cetera. Well, when you're leaking pictures, and let's say I'm one of those guys that's listed in the site for some reason, if I'm going through and I'm looking at let's say these pics, I'm like, okay, look at my area, and now boom, I'm finding, oh, I dated her. That's a huge problem, right? I mean, so here we go. I hope it gets cleaned up. I hope no harm comes to this. I hope I'm not being hyperbolic here, but literally I've seen the sites where they've got the metadata linked to Google Maps. So it's a big issue. And I'm hoping that, quite frankly, nobody gets harmed as a result of this. So, crazy week. Those were your breaches. Were you impacted? Well, if you're on the T app, you were, and that sucks. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please, please, please attempt to stay private. Take care.